Hey everyone, before we jump into today's episode, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor of the show, Procurify. If you've enjoyed the content we put out here, a great way to say thank you, after obviously giving us a 5-star review and sharing with your friends, is checking out Procurify. Procurify is the procure-to-pay platform for charter schools. Basically, that means they help your school manage all the various manual aspects of the purchasing process in one platform. You can learn more at BuyQ.org/Procurify. That's PROCURIFY. All right, now back to the show.
Welcome to Charter School Insider, lessons from the nation's top charter school operators, the only podcast dedicated to the behind-the-scenes business of running a successful charter school. Join us as we sit down with charter school leaders who share how they are overcoming the biggest operational hurdles facing their schools today.
Cari and Dave, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. It's good to see you both.
Great to see you today, Daniel.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's not every day we do an episode all about unspent funds, but I'm excited to talk about E-rate. And for our listeners, if you're like me, you're probably not an E-rate expert, and this is going to be your crash course. So I've invited Cari and Dave from CDW. CDW is one of BuyQ's awarded contract holders, specifically experts in technology and all things ed tech, and brought them in to talk about E-rate because we're on the clock and there's unspent funds and we want to help you access those funds. So before we dive in, Cari and Dave, can you each just give a quick intro on yourselves and then we'll get into E-rate? Dave, why don't you go first and then Cari?
Sure, Daniel, thanks. So I've been involved with E-rate for the past 20 plus years actually, starting out working at USAC where I worked on the E-rate program, helping get the money out to schools, doing auditing, and sorting through issues as the ombudsman. Then I moved into E-rate consulting, directly working with schools, making sure their applications came in. And now I'm with CDW for the past 2.5 years, working with our team to make sure that we can provide the best services to schools and libraries throughout the country.
And hi, Daniel. Thanks for having us on. I'm Cari Warnock, the Education Ambassador for the Digital Ed Tech team on the CDW Education team. And we like to support all programs that help our schools in K-12, especially those that are a little bit smaller or maybe a little bit more niche, like private schools, independent schools, charter schools. And so charter schools is a really big focus for our team. And so E-rate is a big conversation, and there's a lot of urgency right now around these unspent funds.
Love it. All right, so let's start there. It's no secret for the audience that budgets are a little tight this year. Obviously, there's been a lot of sunsetting of government funds with ESSER and challenges around enrollment. Dave, before we hit record, you were telling me it's something like $3 billion are about to expire. Can you just paint sort of the unspent funds picture for us as to what E-rate is and why right now is such a critical time to make sure that your school takes advantage of it?
Sure. So real quick, E-rate covers or provides a discount on the internet access, which is a Category 1 service, the internal connections, basic maintenance, and managed internal broadband services. And there's the Category 2 services. And those Category 2 services have a 5-year budget cycle. And we're coming to the last year of the budget cycle. It started off with about $9 billion in it. And only less than two-thirds of that have been spent. So there's $3.5 billion remaining in the C2 budget. And for the charter schools in the country, it's about $100 million, over $100 million that's available this year to apply for. After this year, that $100 million is going to go away. And then the next 5-year cycle is going to restart, and it'll be probably $300 million for that next 5-year cycle. But if you don't get in and grab that money this year, it's gone. So if you haven't used any of your E-rate funds, Category 2 budget, this year is the year to use it all, or lose it. You will have the opportunity, but again, you're walking away from a lot of your C2 budget that could be used this year.
Perfect. Okay, so if you weren't paying attention, $100 million about to go away. We're going to help you figure out how to use it if you haven't taken advantage of your, I think you said C2 category, which we're going to explain what that means this year. So let's start with some of the basics. So Dave, you already alluded to what E-rate kind of functionally is. Can you explain for us the two categories and some of the specifics as it relates to what products or services schools can actually leverage these dollars for.
Absolutely. So starting off with the Category 1 service, this is your basic internet connection to the school. Everyone has that. Everyone needs it. And you can get up to a 90% discount based on the poverty level of your school for that service. This includes broadband, data, the fiber optic satellite, whatever way it's coming in. Also new last year is bus Wi-Fi. So if you've got school buses, you can actually get the equipment for the bus and the service to the bus. So while kids are traveling to and from school, they can get the internet access there. There's also brand new this year are hotspots. So if your students don't have the internet at home, with the sunsetting of the ACP program, the FCC decided let's make hotspots eligible through E-rate. So students who do not have internet at home get those little hotspot hockey pucks, take them home to connect to the internet so they can do their homework. The big part of what we do here at CDW is the Category 2 services. These are your internal connections, the switches, the wireless access points, the routers, the cabling in the school, everything that makes that connection to the end user equipment. The management of the Wi-Fi. So if you need someone to manage your network, CDWG can do that. Basic maintenance of the equipment. Equipment does break down. You need those bug fixes, the software updates, those patches. Those are also eligible. With the Category 2 services, those are eligible for an up to 85% discount. So a lot of savings there if you go out and apply for this.
Okay, great. So all sorts of things fall under these two categories, both on the product side and on the services side, and things that maybe you wouldn't immediately think of. Cari, I wanted to bring you in here and ask from obviously a lot of what Dave laid out benefits the IT leader or the team that's responsible for managing IT. But what about, like, you were a school leader, what about on the instructional side? What are some of the benefits of some of these things Dave is referencing as it relates to maybe certain instructional models or, access for certain students? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure thing. I think my first day on the job as a school leader, I learned that my IT director was going to be my very best friend. And when servers went down and we lost data or lost report cards or lost any kind of information, it was critical that she was able to maintain the fidelity of that data, but also to be able to retrieve things when we lost them or when we went down for some reason. So all of these components that Dave just described are very important for teaching and learning. And sometimes when we're teachers in classrooms and we close our doors and do our magic, we don't really think about all the wires and cables that are keeping it all connected. But with our student population now really trending towards careers in STEM and careers in tech, I think it's really important that our educators know and understand that the free reduced lunch rates and how our families provide us that information and become eligible then makes our schools eligible for things like these discounts, which makes our students gain access and more equitable services and access to things they need in a digital world. And so I think it's really important that everyone in a school understands, not just the IT directors.
Totally. Yeah, couldn't agree more. So this is not just an IT issue. If you're a school leader, obviously you care about your budget. You also care about the outcomes of your students. And as Cari was mentioning, these are critical infrastructures to the ongoing health of the operation of the school. Let's talk about how you actually access these dollars. So there's all sorts of things E-rate can cover. As with most government programs, the daunting thing is, how do I actually access these dollars? When do I get the money? Do I get it up front? Do I get reimbursed? All those fun things. So Dave, let's get into that.
Absolutely. So let's talk about it. It is a process. Like I said, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen people do huge applications for multi-million dollars on their own. And I've seen people with tiny applications go and hire it out using a consultant. This can be done on your own, or if you set the time up for it, because it does take a little bit of time. Just like any grant type program, this is actually a discount program. You do have to take some steps. The first step is your planning. what services do you need and what are the eligible services? So every school needs internet access if your local school district isn't already providing that for you. You're going to need access points and switches and firewalls. So if you don't already have these, or if they're out of date, you put together the list of what are the services that we need. Then you're going to go onto USAC's website and you're going to file what's called an FCC Form 470. And right now at the holiday season, think of this as your wish list. You've got to put it on the list if you're going to get it. If you don't have it on, you don't have to get it, but it's got to be on the list to take the next steps. So you list out the items that you want on your Form 470, and this will go out after you certify the form. It's going to go out to all the service providers in the country. We all have access to it. We'll go in, review your 470, put together a bid, and submit it to you. After 28 days, you then open up this all the bids that you've received. You always have to wait a minimum of 28 days before doing this, and you evaluate your bids. And with price as the primary factor, not the only factor, so you don't have to go with the cheapest option, but the price of the equipment or services need to be weighted higher than anything else in your evaluation. You'll choose a service provider, sign a contract, you'll document your evaluation, and sign the contract. Come January, the FCC is going to open up what's called the 471 filing window. And that's when you tell USAC, this is who we've chosen. These are the products that we want. This is the cost. Here's a copy of the contract. Please review it and accept it and give us a funding commitment decision letter. So that window runs from January to mid-March. So it is critical to get started soon. You've got to post that 470. You've got to wait at least 28 days. Then you've got to do this filing between January and March. So you've got to have that 470 done no later than the beginning of February in order to make sure you've got enough time to do the next step, to do the evaluation, sign a contract, and fill out the 471.
Got it. So just to jump in on that, we're currently recording this on December 3rd. So what Dave is saying is the time is now, essentially.
Definitely.
We don't have a lot of time to get that 470 done. Sorry, continue.
Absolutely. So USAC's going to review it, this 471 that you've submitted, and hopefully in April you're here, yes, you've been committed, and this is what you can get. With the non-recurring services like the equipment, you can start installing those on April 1st. With the recurring service, your internet access, that's a funding year, and that's going to run July 1st, 2025 through June 30th of 2026. And that's where you'd get the discount, like on your recurring services. Your non-recurring services, again, that can start April 1st. You can't get the discount, though, until July 1st. But, you know, one of the funny things, so they say the funding year is July 1 through June 30th. That's when the money comes out. So it is critical that you go out, get this in. And now you're asking about the discount. So there are two options for the discount. There's the BEAR method, Build Entity Applicant Reimbursement Process, total mouthful, where you would pay your service provider the full amount up front. So if you need the equipment, you don't yet have a funding commitment decision letter, you'd have to go that way. Or after July 1st, you go with the SPY process, where you only pay that discount amount. So if you're buying $100,000 worth of equipment on July 1st, you place that order on July 1st with your FCDL and your Form 486 filed, you'll only pay $15,000 out of pocket. The advantage of the BEAR process, all that money that you get, that $85,000 you would get back from USAC, you can then spend that on whatever you want. If you just pay the $15,000, hey, it's only $15,000 out of your pocket. So great savings there.
So just to clarify, let's go off that example of you spend $100,000 on something and there's an $85,000 discount. The vendors that bid on your 470, they're offering those products and services for $15,000. They're not getting an extra $85,000 from the government, or they are? Like, explain how the discount actually works.
Sure. So the discount is based off of the poverty level of the school.
Okay.
So there's a matrix. So it varies from 90% for category 1, 85% for the category 2 services, down to 20%. That's determined during the 471 process. So the bid you're going to receive is going to be for the full price of that product. The nice thing about E-rate is, for schools, there's another process called LCP, a rule that we have to follow. And so we have to offer you the lowest price, corresponding price, as we offer to other similarly situated schools. So you're going to get the best pricing as well if you're going through this E-rate bidding process. So you'll see the full price on the bid. The school gets to decide whether it's going to be a SPY or a bare reimbursement.
Got it. Okay.
So if you want to pay everything up front, great. And then you can play with the money however you want. If you don't have that full amount, then you request the SPY process. And all service providers are required to allow the school to decide which process they want to follow.
Got it. Okay. So if you're a finance team and you're listening to this, there may be some situational benefits to SPY versus bear. What's our, cash position look like? Do we want that money to come in after July 1? And so the flexibility is up to the school, not the service provider, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. Got it. All right. So just to recap, we've got Form 470. We've got 28 days. Then you look at all your bids, figure out which one you want to go with, and take the next number up.
With price as the primary factor.
With price as the primary factor. And then it's Form 471, consecutive, 470, 471. And then after that, it's up to USAC to actually review and determine if you're going to receive funds. Is that correct? You'll get a funding decision from them.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it. All right. So let's talk about some common pitfalls and some tips for schools here. Just like on the planning side of things, obviously we're recording this as there's a limited time window. But from a planning perspective, Cari, do you have any thoughts on sort of how to think about this as part of a broader, resource allocation plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always went with the rule to have no single point of failure. So have your whole team be aware, because these timelines are really tight. And I've had teams like this that were writing for something similar, and then someone has to have surgery or someone has to go out of state or something, right? So make sure there's no single point of failure. Everybody knows the plan. Make sure you've reversed engineered the plan based on the calendar and timing that Dave just mentioned. And then just work backwards, right? So you have your wish list, you know what you're trying to do, and think about it in a long range sequence, so that you can make sure you're spending all of the funds available to you at the time in which it makes sense. There are some funding programs and some budgets that run July 1, like this one. There are some federal that run September 30th, around October 1st is when you get the funds, right? And then there's others that go on a sort of calendar year, January to December. So it's really important to know all those funding cycles and be aware of how that fits into your plan for E-rate. And beyond that, I would just say, have some accountability systems and processes in place. Be really clear about those and make sure everyone on the team understands them and they're all bought into those accountability systems.
Great. Yeah, really good, helpful recommendations there. Dave, on the USAC side, just, you said you've been doing this for 20 years. If there's $3 billion left, why are schools maybe not getting these funds if they do try and follow the process? Like, what are some of the things that maybe are pitfalls or common mistakes where a school doesn't get the funding decision they thought they were going to get?
Sure. So some of the problems schools have are not following the competitive bidding process properly. So if your school requires you to wait 6 weeks, or you're required to get 3 bids for every project, you have to jump through those highest hoops on your competitive bidding process. You have to follow the 28 days, but you may have to follow longer. You may need to get more bids. USAC doesn't require you to get more than one bid. The FCC doesn't require you to get more than one bid, but if you only get one bid, it needs to be reasonable. You need to be smart about that. You want to make sure you document your bid matrix. So don't just say, well, we thought we'd do that because we like these guys. No, that's not how you do it.
Right.
You actually want to document, put down the date on that bid evaluation. So when they come back 10 years later, it's documented. Some schools think, what are the eligible services? So they may put down laptops. Well, guess what? Laptops aren't eligible for this program. Sorry. The other ways to get that. So you're only looking for eligible products. Think about it as what makes the connection to the school and delivers it to the end user device. If it's not that, if it's an end user device, not eligible. So there are tricks like things to think about when you're filing that way. Service providers cannot be involved in competitive bidding process. We can't write the RFP for you. We can't help you evaluate bids. We can talk to you about products and offerings prior to posting the 470 and can provide more information or ask questions during the 470 process. But all those questions that are asked, the school needs to share those with every other bidder that might come in and ask the question. So you make sure that's a fair and open competitive bidding process. And after that, it's making sure you've dotted all the I's and crossed the T's. So make sure you file on time. Make sure once you've got the FCDL, the funding commitment decision letter from USAC, you review that. Make sure there's no confusion. Did they reduce something? You can appeal that to USAC. And then when you want to start services, you're going to file a Form 486 that says, yes, we're starting services and we're compliant with SIPA. And that's how you can start the invoicing process. So it's critical you follow those steps, you keep it fair, open for all the other bidders that are out there, and you're going to have a great time saving money on all the products that you need.
Yes, that's the fun part. After you jump through the hoops, that's the fun part. So you mentioned you can't have a service provider necessarily, they can't write the form for you. They can't be involved in the bidding process. Obviously that, is a conflict of interest, but they can, as you said, talk to you and be, provide information. So obviously you all are a service provider and you're providing information here. What recommended resources, to schools that might be listening to this and think, oh, well, I want to ask Dave questions. Am I allowed to do that? Or I want to reach out to Cari and get her perspective. What are the guidelines there?
Sure. So you can reach out to your CDW rep and ask, hey, we need new access points. What kind of access points should we look for? Do we need Wi-Fi 5, Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 7, Wi-Fi 8? We've got this many students. So you can ask that sort of questions before posting your 470 so you know that what you're asking for on the 470 is going to be sufficient. Because what you don't want to do is say, I need an access point without letting your service providers know how many students are going to be connected to this. Because some service provider may say, well, fine, I'm going to sell you this very basic home access point that can only support a couple students, as opposed to, do you need an enterprise type of access point that can support hundreds of students? Do you need, what's the building like? Do you have concrete walls and you need an access point in each room? Or do you have an open space where you can get away with just a few access points, saving money there,
right,
based on the topography of the school? So there's some important things to think about.
Got it. Yeah. So treat this like any other RFP where you need to do your due diligence to figure out what the wish list actually is. You can talk to reps, representatives of various companies. You can get advice on, what actual products and services you need to build that wish list that you talked about that's actually going to go in the 470. And all of that is okay. It's just once that form has been submitted, then it's, like any sealed bid, you're not talking to vendors and all that.
Yeah, I mean, there are limited questions. Most 470s do have a question and answer period.
Okay.
And this is very valuable because say you didn't get to scope your 470 properly. You can have questions asked, say, did you really want 5 access points? When I look at your school, it looks like you probably need 50. Well, or do you want this type of a Wi-Fi 6? Because we can look on what you received via the ECF program for your Chromebooks, and they're Wi-Fi 6 compatible. So you want to make sure that you get Wi-Fi 6, not a Wi-Fi 5 access point. You can ask those questions, and then on the 470, the school posts the response to those questions. So it's shared with everyone, and you're able to keep this whole process fair and open, and you're going to get the best bids because you don't want someone to, if we have to look at something that we don't understand the scope, we may have to overbuild for more than you need when you could be purchasing much less. So it's critical that it's scoped properly, and this can be covered on the question and answer period during the 470 process.
Great. All right. Well, Dave and Cari, thank you so much for coming on to talk about E-rate in a very timely manner. And we will link in the show notes. There are some helpful resources around E-rate and kind of summarizing what we talked about here. And we will also put the contact information for some of the folks at CDW you might want to get in touch with if you have questions about E-rate or specific projects for your school. So thank you so much for coming on and giving us a quick crash course. And hopefully that $100 million does not disappear here in the next few months.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to Charter School Insider. This show is brought to you by BuyQ, the group purchasing organization specifically for charter schools. Want to learn how to maximize your school's purchasing power? Join together with thousands of other charter schools by visiting BuyQ.org/sign-up. BuyQ's purchasing program is free and has no obligations or commitments required. If you enjoyed today's episode, do us a favor and subscribe on your podcast listening platform of choice. If you have a question or feedback for us, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at podcast@buyq.org. Thanks, and we hope you'll tune in for the next one.